Versailles, 1919. The day peace got complicated. In the early summer of 1919, the world was still reeling from a war so vast, so brutal, that people had taken to calling it simply the Great War. The battlefields were quiet, but the silence was uneasy. In the Grand Hall of Mirrors at the Palace of Versailles, leaders from the victors, exhausted, bitter, and determined, gathered to decide how the world should move forward. One chair, however, remained uncomfortable, the one reserved for Germany. Germany had come to the palace not to negotiate, but to listen. And, more importantly, to sign. At the head of the room stood the Big Four Allied leaders. Georges Clemenceau of France, stern as stone, had seen his country invaded twice in his lifetime. He was here not just for peace, but for protection. David Lloyd, George of Britain, sharp and calculating, wanted Germany weakened, but not so much that Europe collapsed. Woodrow Wilson of the United States, principled and full of idealism, arrived with his 14 points and a dream of a better, war-free world. Vittorio Orlando of Italy, somewhat sidelined, hoped Italy wouldn't walk away empty-handed. Germany, represented by the diplomat Ulrich von Brockdorff-Rantzau, was handed the treaty. The message was clear: this wasn't a discussion. The document was staggering, 440 articles long, and its message, though cloaked in formal language, could be boiled down to this: Germany, this war was your fault, and now you must pay, territorially, militarily, and financially. Germany was forced to accept sole blame for the war, Article 231, the infamous War Guilt Clause. It had to pay massive reparations that would cripple its economy for years. It lost 13% of its land, including Alsace-Lorraine and all overseas colonies. Its military was gutted. No tanks, no air force, a tiny navy, and an army capped at 100,000 men. It was excluded from the League of Nations, at least for now. The treaty didn't just hurt, it humiliated. For many Germans, it was less a peace deal and more a prolonged punishment. Even politicians who had opposed the war found themselves forced to sign something their people considered unjust. Ironically, the man who had pushed hardest for a fair and lasting peace, President Wilson, left Versailles with his dreams already fraying. The U.S. Senate refused to ratify the treaty, and America never joined the League of Nations. Wilson had crossed an ocean for peace, only to return home to political defeat. Meanwhile, France and Britain, though triumphant, found themselves overseeing a fragile order in Europe. At the time, many believed the treaty would secure peace, but others, economists, generals, even some politicians, sensed that it had only pressed pause, not reset. A young, bitter corporal in Germany, still stewing in the national wound, would later call Versailles a disgrace that had to be undone. His name? Adolf Hitler. The Treaty of Versailles meant to ensure never again. It ended one war, but in doing so, unknowingly planted the seeds of another.